Hello and welcome to episode 197 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. My good friend Maz is back on the show today to return to one of our favorite recurring ideas. We are going to do a Walt Disney World theme park tier list for my favorite park, Epcot. We will rank each and every attraction at Epcot on a tier. Before we get started, I want to make my weekly appeal for new subscribers at the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We are 3 weeks away from our 200th episode. 90% of podcasts give up after 3 episodes. Of the 200,000 podcasts that make it past 3 episodes, 90% of those fail before reaching 20 episodes. This was not something that we could have ever known would make it almost 4 years. If you would click the like button, leave a comment, and of course, subscribe, you would really help us continue to produce this show and do everything we do on the YouTube channel. Because of you, I got a press credential to sit in a small convention room 15 feet away from the great Jodi Benson as she sang Part of Your World at Tampa Bay Comic-Con. Because of this show, I reached out to 2 people I barely knew from Diz Twitter, and they went on to become not only my co-hosts, but more importantly, my friends. Of course, back in 2022, we used the podcast to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. Let's build more momentum leading into that milestone that we have coming up appropriately on Thanksgiving Day. I also want to make a note that November is Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month here in the United States. Since this is a travel podcast, I wanted to make mention of one of my favorite museums in the world. The National Museum of the American Indian is on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. and is part of the Smithsonian. The museum is literally in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol building. It's 100% free to enter, and you can see in depth the story of the different people groups who inhabited this land before European colonization. Unlike many history books, however, the story doesn't stop at European colonization. When I worked in sports radio back in 2012, I interviewed the son of the great Jim Thorpe at the National Museum of the American Indian. It was the 100th anniversary of Thorpe winning 2 gold medals in the 1912 Olympic Games. While those medals were later stripped from Thorpe, who had played some minor league baseball before the 1912 Games, which nullified his amateur status, the IOC had restored them. Thorpe was a member of the Sac and Fox tribe in Oklahoma and played college football at the infamous Carlisle Indian School, where the motto was to, quote, kill the Indian, save the man. He went on to be a professional football, baseball, and basketball player and was instrumental in the creation of the National Football League. The National Museum of the American Indian also has a great bison burger in the cafeteria for those of you who eat meat. Theme parks are great, but I thought I would bring up another place that I have absolutely loved visiting in the past. Right now, let's get things started. Maz, it's awesome to have you back on the show.
Awesome to be back.
So we are going to talk about the best park in Walt Disney World, according to me. I know you will say it is Disney's Animal Kingdom. But we are going to do one of our tier lists. I know people absolutely love these. And we are going to do a tier list for Epcot. I thought it would be fun to do this by going all the way around the park in order. So we're just going to walk through the front gates right now and start with Spaceship Earth. So we're starting strong here. And we can talk about these things not only as rides or attractions, but their importance to the park. So when you're talking about something like Spaceship Earth, not only is it a ride, but it is also the icon of the park. So I do think that has to play a part in it.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I would say this is a easy A-tier ride. Because like you said, it's the park icon. It is Epcot. I mean, when you walk into the park, that is the thing that people associate with Epcot. It's the giant golf ball. And the ride itself is a great ride. I mean, does it need some love and updates? Yes. But it needs updates, not a retheme. The ride itself is a great concept. It is, I think, one of the best examples we have of edutainment in the parks. It is this perfect, relaxing, entertaining ride teaching you about our history and our connection as people. It's a great ride.
I do think one of the things keeping this from being S tier, which I think it would be argued by a lot of people that this is an S tier attraction, but when we were at Epcot recently, you were afraid of it breaking down too much. Jillian, who's been on the podcast before, she won't ride it. She's afraid of being stuck at the top and having to walk down. And I know back in, I want to say September, maybe it was late August, I rode this with a friend and we had a Guardians of the Galaxy return time that was like a half hour away. So we decided, hey, let's go ride Spaceship Earth. What's the harm? And it took us like 45 minutes because of how many times Spaceship Earth broke down on one rotation throughout that ride. And, all of a sudden, they're not really strict about the time you return for Guardians of the Galaxy. But if they were, we might have missed our time because of how long it took. And that is not an unusual thing to happen, that ride break down that much. So I will say A, but if there was anything that made it almost a B, it would be that it definitely needs a refurb.
Yeah, I think, it just needs a little love to get it back to running smoothly, and then we can push it back up to the S tier where it belongs. Because I also think the end of the ride is so creative, where you build your video of your future. And that's such a fun thing that I don't hear discussed a whole lot. And it's a great ride. That's all.
All right. So now we are going to move to the Seas Pavilion. And I'm going to start with Turtle Talk with Crush. This is much like Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor over at Magic Kingdom. It is an interactive attraction where they have found a way to make somebody behind the scenes sound like the character from the movie. In this case, it is Crush, and especially little kids can interact with Crush from the Finding Nemo movies, and that is definitely a fun experience. Now, this is heavily loaded towards the kids, so Maz and I will say this is not for us, but I do think the way that it deals with the purpose of Epcot, which is that edutainment, it does find a way to teach kids about the ocean, teach kids about animals. It's funny. Kids have a blast doing it. I think I could put this as a firm B.
I would agree. I would say it's a firm B for me. Like you said, it's not really geared towards us anyway, but I do think it's something that kids really enjoy. It's a great option. Keep little kids entertained, and it's fun for them. It's not something I feel any need to do, but I think it's a great thing to have in the parks.
If it's raining and I'm getting off the Seas with Nemo and Friends, the actual ride, I will sometimes do this. But, they also have a full-blown aquarium in there, so that usually takes up some time as well. And I guess I kind of maybe should have put the aquarium on this list as well. But let's move over to the Seas with Nemo and Friends. And I know a lot of people might not like this because the old version was more Epcot-y. It was more edutainment than the current version of the ride, which is another one of those Epcot introducing intellectual property into a park that people feel don't need as much intellectual property. What do you think about this ride?
I would give it maybe a D. I know. For me, and it has nothing to do with what you just said. I think that I am totally open to the concept of a Finding Nemo ride. I love the concept of a Finding Nemo ride. I don't think this executed it very well. For me personally, the best part of the ride is the aquarium at the end, which is not part of the ride, and you don't have to ride it in order to get to the aquarium. So, it's just not something that I really enjoy. Also, I don't know if I've just gotten unlucky or what, but the last few times I've ridden it, and I don't do it that often, but it's usually got a low weight. But I happen to be in like a vehicle in between families with young children who were terrified and like crying the whole time. So, I don't have small children to go to Disney with, so I can't gauge. But based on that very small sample size, it seems like it's very hit or miss for little kids.
So I'm going to say a few good things about the ride and then agree with you on the D rating, right? So the one thing it does is it introduces a very popular intellectual property into Epcot, and kids will definitely say, I want to do Nemo. You will hear kids in the park saying, we have to do Nemo. I want to do Nemo. It's usually a 5 to 10 minute wait, which is amazing. Like, you do have to take that into consideration. But I will say, in addition to it scaring kids, which I haven't noticed as much, I have noticed the effects don't always work, and it is very hit or miss. I don't think they put a lot of attention into this ride, and they just kind of let it roll. There is one very impressive feature, and that's when you ride the EAC, but, and here's the but there, you have to hit it at just the right time for the effect to work properly. And if you miss it, you can actually see where the computer like resets. And it's kind of embarrassing. It's not the best Disney effect, but when you hit it just right, it is really, really cool. So I think I could agree with that D rating. The only thing that maybe has me thinking C is that it is never a long wait. But if this is more than 25 minutes, just do not do it. Now, walking out of the seas with Nemo and friends, getting a little bit more water. This is very, very new. Moana's Journey of Water, quite controversial. And at the very beginning, you kind of had to like almost get like a boarding group or a reservation or something to do this. Now we have seen it sort of through a summer of being just a regular attraction at Epcot. So what do you have to say about Moana's Journey of Water?
I mean, I think we've established by now that I don't care super much about IP being in different parks, especially, of course, because I'm biased when it's IP that I really like Moana. I think this is a great addition to the park. I think that it is a great walkthrough attraction, so you really don't have to wait to do it. I think that it cools you down because you get to play with water, and in Epcot, that is huge. I think that it's a lot of fun. It's edutainment because you're learning about water and the water cycle while you're playing with water. It's pretty to look at. I mean, it's just got bonuses upon bonuses. This would be an A bordering on S tier for me. And I don't know if S tier is too far because it's still pretty new. But I really enjoy this, and I think it's great for all ages.
So on the positives of this one, I am going to say that one of the best photo opportunities in all of Epcot is Spaceship Earth behind Te Fiti. That is so cool. They did that so well, knocked it out of the park with that one. Also, people talk about Disney's Animal Kingdom being the hottest park in Walt Disney World, and I do still think that it might be if you take away the back of Hollywood Studios. The back of Hollywood Studios is way too hot. But I will say that I have noticed in recent years as trees have diminished and as walking has increased, especially when there were all the construction walls to build Moana's Journey of Water, that Epcot can be a pretty doggone hot park as well. So introducing this huge water feature was a really, really good idea. Now, maybe it could have been more in the middle of the park when you need it. You're usually not that hot when you just walked into the park. And one final amazing thing is you need it during the day because it's so hot, but it's even better at night because it is just beautiful. They thought about every aspect of this, and Epcot is an adult park. The adults like to go, they like to drink around the world, they like to try different foods. It is easy to bore kids at Epcot, and this gives them another thing to do that is just for them, and I think that's great. I do think that we're kind of putting Moana everywhere, and we're just giving her a little thing here, a little thing there, instead of giving her just the mountain in Adventureland that she is supposed to get, and she should get at some point. But we'll discuss that in a future episode. I agree. I'm going to go A. I'm just going to go a little short of calling that an S tier attraction. Now we are going to go into the Land Pavilion. And I think if you polled regular vacationers versus bona fide Disney adults, I think you'd get a different rating on this one. But we're going to start with Living with the Land. And I am so tempted to make this an S tier attraction, Maz, and I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Oh, I'm right there with you. My very first thought was, can I give this an S tier? Are we okay with that? Because I do think that it's, like you said, really separates us as Disney adults from the crowd of average vacationers. But you know what? It's a great ride. I feel like we've talked about it a few times with the edutainment, but you get such a cool little boat ride in the beginning, going through all these different like biomes and learning about farming and all this stuff. But then you actually get to go into the greenhouse and you get to see the food being grown and you get to see, the lab facilities and, you're seeing food that you're able to eat in the park. And that's such a cool thing. And maybe I don't know, maybe that's just us being like nerds about this and finding that incredibly cool. But I do think that that is such a unique thing to find in a theme park of all places. I mean, truly, what other theme park can you go into to go on a ride and go, oh, yeah, that's the salad that we're eating for dinner? Or to then go on a tour, which is very well priced, to go behind the scenes of that attraction and learn even more about it. It's such a cool opportunity and such a unique thing to bring to a park.
We talked about ways that paid Fast Pass has changed the parks for the negative. And I think in that conversation, we came to the agreement that something like Living with the Land never would happen today. It takes up a lot of space. There are literal scientists working there that they employ as cast members. And there's no intellectual property. Sometimes they do fun little things now where they do incorporate a little bit of IP, and that is fun because they'll just put like a little setup, a little tea party from Alice in Wonderland, or they'll put Figment somewhere or something like that. And I do enjoy things like that, but it has no IP attached to it normally. It is complete edutainment, and it usually only has a 5, 10, maybe 15-minute wait. Now, if it rains, it will get like a 45-minute wait because everybody's trying to hide from the rain. I love this. It's relaxing. A hot day at Epcot, you ride this in the middle of the day and you get that air conditioning and you get the breeze coming off the water because it is a boat ride. Everything about it. I agree. S tier. 100% S tier. Have you ever done Awesome Planet?
I can't say that I have.
Okay. I am going to give this a D. It's not bad. Like, it's fine. But it's a video and it's a movie. Yes, they do blow some, air at you at certain times to try to make you feel different. You're in the desert and they make it a little warmer. But overall, I think the message is good. It shows how all of the different biomes sort of interact with each other and how you need all these different, neighborhoods, if you will, on the earth. But it doesn't do enough to draw people. Like, you have been to Epcot how many times since it has existed and haven't even felt the need to do it. So I wish that they would find something with an IP to put in here so that you do make it something that kids want to do. Like, I don't know, Anna and Elsa can teach you about the biomes. Whatever they do, I just think that it is kind of a waste of a big theater because they could make this something that would draw more people.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say on this last trip, it was really hot out and I did have a moment of, oh, maybe I should do it as I was walking through the land pavilion. And I made really awkward eye contact with the poor cast member who was standing outside Awesome Planet, just being like, please, somebody come into the show. Please come in. And I was like, oh, no. As I kind of scurried away. So maybe next time.
Oh, that awkward eye contact with the cast member at an unpopular attraction. I know that well. So, this next ride is the ride that I think if you would have done this 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, I think most people would list it as an S tier. This is the ride that went from must-have fast pass, rope drop, to average middle-of-the-road ride faster than any ride at Walt Disney World that I can remember. Soarin' Around the World. And obviously they changed from Soarin' over California to Soarin' Around the World. That played a part in it. Now, after this has been here for a few years and the technology doesn't quite awe us as much as previous years, what are you thinking about this one? This might be the hardest one on the list.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one because on one hand, it is very enjoyable every time I do it. And I never regret doing it, but you do always get to a certain point of the film where you're looking at it and you're kind of turning your head because everything is kind of just crooked and taking that little leaning angle. And that does kind of detract from the overall ride quality, especially when, like you've said, technology has advanced. You can go to Animal Kingdom and ride Flight of Passage, which is, while not exactly a one-to-one comparison, a similar style of attraction where you're looking at a screen. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm torn between A and B. And I think what's pulling me to A is the fact that you get the smells. And I think that's a cool little sensory aspect if, you like engaging all your senses on a ride. But, I don't know. This is a really tough one. This might be the toughest one yet.
So here, this is what's going through my mind. I think if it was Soarin' over California, which people liked the actual ride itself more because you didn't have the warped screen, like you didn't have the Eiffel Tower thing where it bends if you're in A or C. I think it would rank higher for most people. Plus, when you talk about the sensory and the smell, the orange grove smell is amazing. Somehow, in Soarin' Around the World, they made the Serengeti smell like freshly cut grass. But I don't think somebody's cutting the lawn in the Serengeti with Mount Kilimanjaro in the distance. I think that there are a few things that do impact my enjoyment of this ride. At Walt Disney World, the queue is awful. The queue is boring. It feels like you're in a mall, but in the section of the mall where there aren't any stores. Even if it is a 5-minute wait, it still takes 20, 25 minutes for you to get on the ride. It has one of those long pre-shows. And yes, we love the pre-show. It is a great pre-show. Patrick, funny as all heck. But I still think when you incorporate all of those things, this might I can't believe I'm saying this after how excited I was the first time I rode it. I'm putting it at a C.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, well that makes me feel less bad about thinking B, so I'll stick with that.
Okay,
I
okay.
do I I do think the queue is a great point because it is really a bad queue. And they put in like those screens to try to make you feel better about it where they're like play trivia. Um
Nobody's playing
but
trivia.
yeah, nobody's doing it. Nobody's paying attention to it. And it's also just not like engaging trivia questions that would really invite people to play it. Yeah, and I do think the fact that you really have to be in in what is it, carousel B, so you don't get as much warp. You know, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting a decent experience on the ride, which is a little frustrating, especially if you spent, half an hour or longer waiting for it.
And I do hate it because it is a really, really good ride. It's fun. Every time I do it, it takes a lot out of me to agree to do it because I know that I'm going to have to sit through the pre show and you're going to get divided into the 3 different, theaters and it's going to take longer than you think. But then when I'm getting off the ride, I'm like, that was fun. I think when people complain about intellectual property being brought into the parks, the fact that this is such an Adventures by Disney commercial now, that it is not soaring over California. Like when I was a travel agent, I was literally on phone calls where they're like, we're never turning back to over California because we're trying to sell these Adventure by Disneys. And it was a little awkward, and you can see it once you're looking for it, and that's another weird thing. It's just great ride, great concept, but now I don't know.
I was just going to say, what's also kind of funny about it is you go to Epcot at the end and it looks completely different than what Epcot looks like now. And it's so funny to me because I rode it next to a family and, we're like at the end of the ride and we're flying over Epcot and, it's like, wow, how cool. And the mom next to me was like, is this Epcot? When was this? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, do they have a fountain? No, they do not. Like it looks very different now than it does in the movie, which is just kind of interesting.
Yeah, you're definitely opening up that can of worms there about the fountain. So we are going to move next, and this is probably the second hardest one to judge because, well, we'll just get into it. Journey into Imagination with Figment. Obviously, when you talk about downgrading Soarin' over California to Soarin' around the world, this is a downgrade that if you can go back and see videos of the original Imagination ride with Figment and Dreamfinder and the steampunk bike and all of those different things, this used to be an A, maybe S tier bordering ride. Now it is a very, very popular character on a ride that if it was any other character would be an F tier. But because people have that nostalgia for Figment, they have that love for Figment, I do think it's sitting around C tier. Is that too low?
That's what I was thinking. I think that, like you said, the character is so beloved, that like it's hard not to feel swayed by that. Um, but the ride itself, it's needed some updates for a long time. And it's needed maybe an overhaul for a while as well. I feel like yeah, especially compared to what it was, which I know is kind of unfair because we do have to judge it in its current iteration, but it's just not the ride it could be, which is disappointing. But I will say, I mean, when I rode this as a kid, my whole family was obsessed with it. Like my sister and I, as young under 10-year-olds, were like singing One Little Spark for the rest of our trip. Um, and like our big souvenir that we chose was a Figment mouse pad. Like big deal for us. So it does have some charm, still to it, I think, but yeah, it's not what it could be.
That's where we're going to leave things off in this episode. We'll pick up at this point next week and we'll move back into World Showcase. There's still so much to talk about, including the brand new Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. There's so much more on the horizon on the show, so you will definitely want to make sure that you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Next month, Epcot's International Festival of the Holidays will get started. I love to bring you all of the festivities because I know the holidays can be tough for some people, but I think seeing these traditions from around the world can help. In January, it will be the beginning of my favorite Epcot festival, Festival of the Arts. Of course, there will be all of the holiday decorations at the resorts and in the parks. I'm also going to be traveling around Florida to show you some other holiday celebrations while continuing to look out for nature and hiking trails. Next Thursday, I will be back with Maz to finish the Epcot attraction tier list on episode 198 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.